eyes. What does it mean correct in your eyes? It means that you've decided to bring them, that you think it's appropriate, a donation. However, obligations, light takriva, that you don't bring. Minacha isu naziris, yesharis nino. Karban mincha, and the nazir, those are things that you find correct in your eyes. Those are things that you'll bring because that was your own donation. Now a nazir has an obligation to bring those. But who told him to be a nazir? Himself. It's accepted on himself, so that's a donation. Rabbanan say, Ein mincha b'bama. You don't bring a carbon mincha in the bama. In nazir sarchayvas nino. A nazir is an obligation. Depends how you look at the nazir. Once he gets into it, then he has obligations. But who got him into it? So the sages look at it that you're in this already. Now you have obligations. You can't bring them on a bama. Amar Shmuel. Regarding the nazir, Shmuel comes along and says that the machlekes between Reb Meir and Chachamim, if he's allowed to bring his nazir sacrifices on a bama, that's only regarding the chatas, machlekes b'chatas v'asham. That's the chatas and the asham of the nazir. However, aval ba'ilus shlam divrei kol yesharis nino v'krevi. Shmuel has a chiddush. The sages said that the nazir doesn't bring his sacrifices during this time on a bama, because it's an obligation. So Shmuel says the sages agree that he is allowed to bring his burnt offering and his peace offering, which are normally brought as donations, and in this case they're brought because he's a nazir, and he is allowed to bring it on a bama. So where's the argument between the Chachamim, the sages in Reb Meir regarding a nazir? That's regarding the chatas and the asham of a nazir, the sin and the guilt offering of the nazir. And the question over there would be, is it considered a donation because he got himself into this, or is it an obligation? So Moisiv Rabbah. Rabbah asked the question. We have a brisa that says that regarding certain sacrifices, there's a difference between the way they're brought in the desert and the way they're brought in the Beis Hamikdash, the way they brought on Bama, or the way they brought in Bama Gedela. Chazav v'sheik, b'trumas lachmi taida, noigim b'Bama Gedela v'noigim b'Bama Katana. On a private altar, when someone brings his shlamim, certain parts of the shlamim are given to the Kohen. Not on a private altar. Private altar, it stays with the owner. So we're looking now at differences between private altars and public altars. Now, v'ilo azreya b'sheila shaira. This brisa doesn't mention anything about the arm, the part of the ram that the nazir brings of his shlamim. The nazir brings a peace offering. The front leg of the shlamim goes to the kohen. Now, if
he's doing it private? If he does it private, he has to give it to the
Well,
kohen.
the question was, is he allowed to bring it at all?
I'm saying, how does it work with a private bama? You have to have a kohen there, right?
No. We're going to see. Private bama, there's no kohen. A zar does it. Any person would offer it on.
Okay.
Now, the problem here is that Shmuel claims that everyone agrees that the nazir brings his shlamim and his oila. And we have a brisa that discusses the differences between a private altar and a public altar. And it doesn't mention how the ram of the nazir would be brought on a private altar, which sounds like it's not brought. So, if there's an argument between the sages and Reb Meir regarding this itself, so Hamani Rabbanani. I'll just say that the Bryces, the rabbis who say that it's not brought. Why is it not mentioned what to do with the arm, the front leg of the ram of the nazir? It must be it's the opinion of the rabbis that say that it's not brought on a bama. But if the whole machlekes between the sages and Reb Meir is only regarding the sin and the guilt offering of a nazir, but they all agree that a peace offering of a nazir is brought. So Hamani, so who's the brisa that mentions only what to do with other shlamim, but not to do with the shlamim of the nazir? Whose opinion is that? Everyone holds that it's brought on a private altar, and there's no discussion about what to do with that. That you have to give that leg to the kohen. Doesn't say. Rather, we have to restate the statement of Shmuel. Shmuel was explaining what the argument was between the sages and Reb Meir. We have to restate it. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Machlokes b'Oila v'Shlamim. The Machlokes is about an Oila and a Shlamim. Exactly the opposite. We said before everyone agrees about the Oila Shlamim. Now we're saying that no. They're arguing about Oila Shlamim. Aval b'chatas v'ashim divrei kol chayvus ninav like krevi. Everyone agrees that the sin offering and the guilt offering are not brought on a private altar. The whole machlokes between Rabbi and Chachamim is regarding the peace offering and the burnt offering. The sages say that it's not brought, and Reb Meir says that it is brought because Reb Meir says that it's a donation, and the sages say that it was a donation before you started, but now it's an obligation. Amar Mar. The sages said. This is the second time we mentioned the sages. Sages said that anything that the community would bring in the tent of meeting in the desert, they would also bring in the tent of meeting that's in Gilgal. But a private person would only bring an oila and a shlamim. The Gemara says, "My time ayu derabanan." Where are the rabbis getting this? That the community brings their obligation offerings. So Amar Kra, we have a pasuk. The pasuk says, "This is this is in the book of Shoftim." It says, "In those days, Ein Melech b'Yisrael." It says it several times in Shoftim. There was no king in Israel. In Ish HaYasher Be'einav Yaseh. Each person did what was correct in his eyes. Now the Gemara understands this. There's different ways of understanding it. The simple interpretation is that it's putting down the situation that was going on then. It's like it's a derogatory term. That it was just wild, anarchy. There was no king and everyone just did what was correct. But some interpret it that it means there was no king, and nevertheless everyone was doing the right thing. That's a different. Our Gemara learns it that they were allowed to bring sacrifices that were donations. Ish hayasher beina. What was yasher? Yasher meant things that were correct in your eyes, that the things that you thought would be appropriate. That meant you donated it. Ish yashar asud l'leikra. A man was allowed to bring a donation offering, but chayvas loyleikra. But obligation offerings, a man was not allowed to bring vitzibur. But what about the community? It only says ish hayasher beinav. The man is allowed to bring what was correct, but the community afilu chayvas likarev. Even obligations, the community is allowed to bring. That would be the opinion of the sages. Now, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, Rabbi Yehuda said.
He was the most mako, right?
Yeah. He says the community was allowed to bring in the desert. The community was allowed to bring in Gilgal as well. He was mako regarding the community, but not regarding the individual bringing his obligations. He still held that it was only donations. He doesn't mention the nazir if you can bring. He doesn't mention the mincha. It seems like according to Rabbi Yehuda, he can't bring the nazir. So he was lenient, most inclusive for the community. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Amalach. What will Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda held. You're right. Rabbi Yehuda is the most lenient because he held that the individual was allowed to go to the community altar and offer there all his obligations.
Right.
That's the So you're correct. So Rabbi Yehuda Malach Kiksiv Hayashar Be'inav. When does it say what's correct in his eyes? He does. Kiksiv Hayashar. How do you read that? What's that? Abe'enav hudiksiv. It's referring to in his own eyes. When does he bring a donation? That's what's in front of him. That means on his own bama, on his small bama. Aval bebama gedola, but if it's on a public altar, afilu chayvus nami likarev, then he's allowed to even bring his obligation offerings. According to this, what we said before, that it was mechusar zman, would not be fit according to Rabbi Yehuda. We mentioned before that all the 14 years the sacrifices weren't allowed to be brought. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's not so. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they could have brought it, they just had to travel to Gilgal. Elahaksiv ish, what does it mean that a man only brings his obligation? Lav l'meimra, is it not to say the ish yishar sudulikarev, that the man, the individual, is only allowed to bring his obligation, is only allowed to bring his donation, but not his obligation during that time. Ha'chayvas leilikarev, but he's not allowed to bring the obligation offerings. He's only allowed to bring his donation offerings. We're asking on Rabbi Yehuda, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, he is allowed to bring his obligations, but to the public altar. My answer is kiksev ish lahachsher sazar. The ish is not excluding his obligation offerings. The ish is including anyone is allowed to bring the offerings. You don't need a kohen. So the Gemara asks, I know that you don't need a kohen from another verse, which would then free up the word ish, which would then exclude obligation offerings. The zar, it's called the zar. Zar is a non-kohen. It says that on the altar of Hashem you need a kohen. But if it's not the altar of Hashem, because it's a private altar, you don't need a kohen. I know it from a different verse. Now you're telling me you know it from ish. So nafka, it's brought from there. It's brought from that verse. Ma'od tema, what might you have said? Liboy kadosh b'chayres k'mi kara. Could have thought that on private altars, who would bring the sacrifices? A firstborn, just like it was done before the giving of the Torah, when they had the firstborns were the kohenim. Kamash Malan, it comes to teach us that you don't even need the firstborns. Anyone can do the service on a private altar. Yeah. Now the Gemara asks Chacham behind the Tanakama. We mentioned the opinion of the sages twice. Amarav Papa Karvan Nesachim B'Midbar Kebeinayu. There's actually a difference between the two opinions. One opinion of the sages held that the Nesachim were brought in the desert. Nesachim are the libations, and the other opinion held that there were no Nesachim in the desert. And this goes back to a machlekes that we had earlier, if there were Nesachim in the desert. In the beginning of the Brisa, the sages, they're talking about that they hold that there were no Nesachim in the desert, because it says when you will come into the land, and when you will come into the land, you will bring Nesachim only on the public altars, but not on the private altars. However, the sages say that there were the second sages, they say that there were Nesachim in the desert, and so therefore when you come into the land you have to bring Nesachim. What does it mean? It means you'll have to bring Nesachim even on the private altars. Right? That's how we learned it before. Okay, let's stop over here.